And this is unfortunately becoming the kind of the hallmark of every single announcement by this government. You know, it doesn't ever add up to what actually is happening in reality. They said they had a trade deal with the US, they haven't. They said they got a trade deal with the EU, they haven't. They said they got a trade deal with India, well maybe, but it's not a very good one. William Clouston is here. I mean, it is becoming very, very common, isn't it, where the government and Keir Starmer, I mean, he's been accused of lying now by Andrew Griffith there, also by Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary. You know, these are pretty strong words for politicians to use about each other.
Yes, Starmer's the worst. He's probably the worst.
He really is.
I've never come across a politician like that. But on the trade deal, it's very interesting because it was heralded in early May. You know, I think it was the 8th of May when it was announced.
Yeah.
Landmark economic deal.
Yeah.
Landmark. But only had 3 provisions really. You had 13,000 tonnes of beef. Well, it's a few cattle.
Yeah.
And you had 100,000 cars. We sell about that number of cars to the States now.
Right.
And that was on a quota.
Yeah. And
that's going in at 10% tariff, fine. And then steel apparently was exempt.
Right.
But Trump has now given a rally speech in Pittsburgh, you know, the Steelers,
right,
and said that steel tariffs are going to be 50%.
Right.
So the problem is, I mean, I don't want to give any credit to the government because they're a shambles, but if it's 50%, it's 50%. If it's nil, it's nil. And I don't think we know, the public don't know, the steel producers don't know what's going on.
Right. And that is the problem. So why announce that you've got a deal when you haven't got a deal?
It's not, and it's not, what I really despise about this government and about politics in general now is it's all about PR and comms. They've got these immature, quite young people that think it's all about comms and not about good governance. If you speak to people in the country, what the public want a strong and unified Britain that's governed well.
Yeah.
They want it governed well. And all of the efforts that these people are concentrating on is PR and spin. So to call this tiny little deal, which Griffiths is quite right actually, Parliament hasn't seen this deal.
No.
It hasn't been published. I can't read it. I can read a press release. That's all I can see.
Yeah.
And in any case, it's not, everyone knows. I mean, as you know, I'm on record, I think tariffs are very useful in building, reindustrialising. I think we need them.
Yeah.
But Trump is there's so many sharp turns, Mike.
Right.
No one, would you, if you did a deal with Trump today, would you know it would be there tomorrow? Come on.
You wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
Absolutely not. I mean, all you can do, I suppose, is sign the deal in some way, shape or form. I mean, you can shake hands on the deal. But, you know, as you said, he could just turn on a whim for one particular reason. He might not like something that he's seen on TV.
Yes.
And suddenly the deal's off.
Yeah. But so if that's the case, then it's wrong. And I think it's wrong for the government to pretend that it's a landmark, or we've now got the trade deal.
But that's the problem.
That is the problem.
That's the credibility
it's a form
gap
of lying.
Now. The credibility gap now is vast in terms of not just the Labour Party, but also in the Tory party sense as well. Because you know, last week, for example, I had a couple of rows with Tory MPs because they came on and started attacking Nigel Farage, and I just said, you know, what are you doing that for? He's not in government. You know, why are you wasting your time on that?
They're terrified.
Well, they are terrified.
Yeah.
They don't want to say that, but attack the government. You know, take the government on. But they're both, I think, for a lot of our viewers anyway, and people who voted Reform at the last election, many people just don't trust politicians. They trust Reform because they're new, and as long as Reform don't tell the same kinds of lies, they'll continue to trust them. And the same goes for the SDP.
Yeah, I think we're a bit more substantial than Reform. We're much smaller, but I think Reform are benefiting from total collapse in trust in the two-party system and in SW1 and the system, and they're using, not unreasonably, they're using Reform as a sort of cudgel, as a wrecking ball. They'll use whatever they can, Mike. That's the way it goes. But
you can't surely just keep on. I mean, Andrew Neil wrote the piece that I'm sure you saw, where he said in 55 years of covering politics in this country, he's never come across a more sort of mendacious and lying individual than Keir Starmer.
Well, I've said that he's the most duplicitous politician I've ever seen, and everything, and it still appalls me. The man that was most responsible, put most effort into denying a democratic vote in 2016, the Brexit vote, a few years later he's standing up in front of union flags and saying how patriotic he is. And he didn't even want the government, the country to run itself. No. He didn't. He was the main opposition. And
he's still, even now, running back into their arms, hoping that, you know, they'll sort of envelop him and bring him back into the fold because he feels more comfortable there. You know, we do a thing here called Lie of the Day, and I just look out for his first tweet. His first tweet today came out at 8:04. And this is what it says. My first duty is to keep the British people safe, which is why national security is a foundation of my plan for change. Our £5 billion investment into defence will create hundreds of jobs, boost the economy and defend our country. Now, the trouble is, I don't know if I believe a word of that. I mean, certainly the national security of this country is not being done on the south coast, where, you know, thousands of young men are coming in literally every week. And that is part of our national security. He's not doing anything about it.
Well, he is doing something about it, Mike. He's gone into business with the gangs.
Well,
I mean, he's in business with them because the model relies on the incentives that his government give the gangs.
Yeah.
Without the incentives, if you don't have a nice hotel room and you don't have benefits, and you don't have your dentistry done and driving lessons and the rest of it, in particular, if you don't have the prospect, the almost certain prospect that you will stay if you get here, the model goes.
Yeah.
And I've said,
and that would stop them.
And it would stop, but he's not interested. Labour in general have no credibility on this at all. And you've got, you know, organisations like the Women's Safety Initiative starting up quite rightly because people are concerned about disproportionate crime amongst some of these groups.
Yeah.
Unvetted fighting age males coming in their thousands. And people get so fussed about, it is an invasion, obviously, unless you're retarded.
Yeah, it is a rude invasion. There's no harm in saying that word. I mean, we had a message from somebody called Tina, who's a listener, earlier on, who said, we've been on a war footing as women in this country ever since this mass influx of migrants have come. And when we walk down the street, we know the streets have changed.
And that's, people have said it. And actually, if you only have to, I don't copy them all, but I've had a look at some of them, Women's Safety Initiative testimonies. Listen to what people are saying, what young women are saying about how they feel walking the streets of Britain, and it's harrowing.
Yeah, and again, you know, they've got a government with people like Jess Phillips in it saying, you know, we're helping young women and girls and making the streets safer for them. Well,
nonsense.
You're not. It's just not true.
It doesn't make any sense.
And you can't lie about stuff like that.
And that's why there's
see through it.
Because people say, well, nothing you say means anything to me anymore.
Exactly.
And that's why the public are annoyed, and I can understand them when he's about reform. As I say, reform's like a sort of wrecking ball. They've stolen quite a lot of our policies. I mean, I always say to people it would be good if they actually believed in them. You know.
Well, I mean, I'm sure Nigel Farage will tell you that he believes in all of his policies, but I mean, I'm not here to represent him. Tell us as well what's going on in Scotland, because there's a by-election coming up on Thursday, and obviously we can't get into it too much because we're in a voting period. But there's been some activity up there in regards to free speech, right?
Yeah. Well, there's. I can't comment on the actual case because it's now live.
It's a live case.
But a very quite an alarming thing happened last week, which is that the leader, no less, a political leader, Craig Houston, the leader of the Social Democratic Party in Scotland, was arrested and charged in relation to an online communication issue. I can't say anything about it at all, and I'm not going to. But just broadly, Mike, you know, and you've covered in this programme the issue of online communication, members of the public getting arrested and things, and it is very concerning.
It is, and it's not going away, is it? Because despite what we hear from politicians saying, we actually don't hear it from Keir Starmer, but we used to hear it from Tory politicians, you know, we don't wish to police people's tweets, and yet it's still going on.
Yeah, I mean, because of what's happened, a lot of normal members of the public are concerned about getting a knock at the door. And obviously another case unrelated to that, but you know, you've got Alison Pearson, a journalist, getting a knock at the door by the police. So a lot of people are very concerned and scared actually about it.
No,
anyway, the leadership team in the SDP and myself stand by Craig, very mild-mannered fellow and a valued colleague.
Well, most of these cases tend to be overblown, don't they? I mean, we know about the Lucy Connolly case. We've got Lord Hermer sitting in judgment of that case in particular, which we now know he did, when we also know that he has a very different view of other infractions, whether they be actual physical, you know, violent infractions or threatening actions. We've got a rapist, we've got a paedophile, we've got a terrorist fundraiser, all of whom were given lighter sentences than Lucy Connolly. He did not intervene on the basis that it was in any way too lenient, which tells you an awful lot about Lord Hermer, doesn't it?
Well, yes. I mean, if you look at his history, you've got to wonder whether a person like that really has the interests of the British people at heart. I wonder whether he will last actually. I don't think he will. I don't think he will. I think he's out the next time there's a reshuffle. No question at all. We've got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, William. Let's get a